you mute yourselves if you're not asking a question. And then also, Muska and I were talking earlier, and when we go to look at all those documents that Kate sent to us, you have the ability to scroll up and down on the document, because Muska said that she could be scrolling up and down, and that doesn't necessarily mean you can see that. So if you want to move through the document up and down, and you have the ability to do that on your screen. So that all being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kate. So Kate, why don't you get us started?
Okay, terrific. Is Lauren joining us?
I did hear back from Lauren, and I sent her 2 emails, one with the corrected link. So at least she will, but I didn't hear.
And I know Beverly is not joining us, so we'll just connect up with them at another point in case you have any questions. Good morning, all. Happy Friday.
Friday.
I hope everybody's a little rested. We have a lot to cover today, so I'll just get going. So today we're going to have you all understand. So we're doing this in-depth briefing. Both the Unified Financial and the Program Monitoring tools, Tricia and Bill are going to present those. CS's or DCA's monitoring report template, and then the document request list ties to the report template. And all these things are fairly new. The internal grant monitoring team came up with some of this a couple of years ago, and DCA has been using them, some of them, as we go over last year. Document request list is something still in draft and very new. So we're getting an early peek at some of this. Next, I'll just kind of go down. I did just kind of, at every meeting, just so we all continue to be on the same page, just recap exactly what we're doing. I summarized this, but obviously we're assisting OCS and understanding the ACSI results, providing them feedback on the proposed changes, big chunk of which you're going to see today, and then figure out how we're going to communicate some of these changes to the network. At the end of all this, we'll have a document detailing what we've learned from focus groups we're going to hold, and then hopefully a communication plan. To cover a lot of the activities that we had set forth. So today, we're the information requested from states, the unified monitoring tools, and the state assessment report template. At a meeting next Friday, we'll cover the last 2 bullets there. It's all on the same page here. Okay, next. So, just because we're now, and actually OCS has an internal SharePoint site where we're putting all of the monitoring stuff, and this is one thing we've been developing in terms of having everybody on the same wavelength regarding the stages. So today we're going to really focus on stage 2 monitoring. Last year, we recall, we talked about the prioritization assessment. So today, we're going to talk about the document request list, which usually goes out with the engagement letter, the actual monitoring tools that are used on site, and a little bit of the post monitoring in terms of the report template that's used. So see, we've kind of looked at monitoring in 3 different segments, three parts, 3 stages to the cycle. The stage 1, the prioritization and selection, which we talked about last time, the actual monitoring, and then stage 3, post-monitoring. We'll cover next week. Next. Okay, before we launch into what we're going to cover today, I just wanted to find out if you had any questions based on the last, we had the last briefing, and on the ACSI data or anything about the prioritization tool and process. Because I know there's a lot we gave you in one meeting, and you probably had a chance to think about it afterwards. But if there are any questions, now would be the time to ask. Anyone?
No, I have any questions.
Okay, great. So I'm glad everybody's clear on the track. Obviously, if questions as we go along, the next few weeks will be fine. All right, next. look at the document request list, and I'm going to turn this over to Alicia. People through, and it may make sense for you all. Besides, we're going to show the document on the screen, but I sent you hard copy, so hopefully you can also go along with us. You might want to go back to the pre-screen. A couple things that Alicia might want to cover first. So, Alicia, go ahead.
Thank you. The document request list, this list that you will get or are looking at now is being used currently or is being used by the CSBG and also the LIHE program. This document request list with the engagement letter, and I think we had discussed that the engagement letter is sent within 30 days of a visit. A lot of times we may send out, depending upon you know, the timeline, we may go ahead and send out the document request list prior to the engagement letter, just for you to review, so you'll at least get a heads up as it relates to the document. So very comprehensive, and it takes into consideration both fronts. So when you look at the document request list, do you mind flipping over to the document request list? Bring up the, okay, thank you. And so this document is captured in a couple columns. So as far as the document, we describe the type of, we categorize the document by if it's programmatic or if it's program, financial, and also if you scroll down, we also capture information on retrieving the single audit. The category that's next to it, we index this. This is used, and a lot of times we ask the states to provide, when they're uploading the information, either through some form of portal, through Basecamp, or sending an email out, we will ask them to identify the type of document, and that's what that category used for as far as indexing. The document type, it just describes the type of document that we're requesting. For example, we ask for policies and from the admin or finance or program. So if you scroll down through, you'll see the various types of documents that we request. So when we're performing a pre-monitoring analysis, we have all the documents. In some cases, a lot of documents can also be presented when we're in the field doing the actual field work testing. But this gives you an idea of the type of documents that we review, and also it also provides the with what type of documents they should ensure that they have when we are doing the assessment. We have a date, so we understand sometimes the state may be in another audit or performing another or at a conference. So sometimes those due dates will vary depending on the availability and the readiness of information. And elements that we may feel are also that you may want to annotate there when you're uploading your documents for our review. So again, this document request list comes along with the engagement letter, and the document request list provides all the source records that we would need to perform a state assessment to make sure that the documents are complete. So that's what this list contains.
And to clarify, and you may have said this, this is a kind of a complete list. It doesn't mean that everything on here is requested from each grantee. So there are things that are selected based on either a comment or a due date. So not everything will always be asked for. Obviously, there's differences between the HEAP and the CSBG programs, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Oh, any questions? Hopefully you had a chance to look at this. Any questions? Obviously, we wanted to do this particular request list, and this has not yet begun being used. It's starting to be used sometime this year, but the goal here was to have something that grantees can see from get-go and have as sort of this is what could be asking, but it also is helpful for the people out, the OCS staff, don't have to create a document list every time they do this, which is, a huge waste of time for everybody. So they can just take this and check off what's needed, and it's done. So that's why this was developed. So, questions?
This is Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had a question on how the document list was created. And the second question is, does it link to the monitoring tool?
That's tool?
To the monitoring tool?
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Alicia.
Well, to your latter part of the comment, it has linked to the various questions that we have on the tool. So, for example, the tool will annotate, do you have policies and procedures available? So we'd like to look at what those policies and procedures are as it relates to your financial oversight and also your program oversight. So if you identify for SBG, a lot of the documents on here we do request, and also it piggybacks off of supporting documentation that we would need to confirm that you're in compliance with maybe certain elements of the CSBG Act. So, example, waiver or prior approvals, if there were any limitations of use of funds that were not allowed and there was a waiver that we approved, we request that type of documentation. The sample selection to confirm, for example, the general ledger, we do pull a sample of your general ledger expenditures. So we do that. The single audit we do pursuant to the tool, and also the Act, where it requires that the states are responsible for federal reporting. We have to ensure that all supporting documentation is complete, and that we use the Act along with the 40 CFR.
So yeah, okay, good. So the answer is yes, you're trying to list with the monitoring tool and then connects that to the report template, which is why we decided to present this document list today, because obviously this list is sort of a pre-monitoring activity, but since it links to everything, we wanted you to see this. In terms of how it was created, Alicia, and who did you work with in LIHEAP, Alicia? I forget who it was. Was it Patrice?
That's correct.
So Alicia worked this. They look at all the documents that are now requested, look at what was duplicate, so we only asked it once, figured out what really was asked, dropped anything that wasn't really useful. So it was those two that came up with it, and then they presented it to the grant monitoring team, who made some edits and suggestions, and this is the document that they're now proposing be used. So that was developed. Okay.
Oh,
Matt?
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah. So looking at the list, when this would be sent out to someone, would there be more detail on specific elements? Because like you were saying a minute ago, like one of them is detailed ledger, and then later it says specific sections pulled from ledger. So you'd be asking for one of those, or and there's several. Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you hear your question? I heard part of it, but didn't hear the last part of it.
I'm saying, if this went out to a state, would it be specific information to tell what wanted out of those documents, or would it just be this list? Like one of them says detailed ledger, and then later sample selections pulled from ledger, and then some of them kind of look like they're things that agencies would have or eligible entities would have, not state, like. No, go ahead.
Question So as I had mentioned a little earlier, so what we do in most cases, we'll send out the document request list along with the engagement letter, but there is a conversation that occurs after you receive the engagement letter to go over a lot of the documents, because we understand that we say something like something may be expressed differently from your office, and we express something in our office. So there may be the same message, but two different meetings. So we would actually communicate with the state, have calls to go through the list of items that we are requesting, and the sample selection. So that being said, everything on this list, for the most part, we do obtain. There may be some documents we may not obtain pre-monitoring, but a lot of those documents are then obtained as we're on site. The sample selection occurs, and we will go over that during the tool. But primarily, we will pull the general ledger we will pull expenditures from the general ledger. From there, we will then provide you with maybe 10 or 15 samples that we will use to, like the state, to provide supporting documentation. So when you sample selections, that's just one of our areas of documents that we have to have for completeness.
And, excuse me, since this hasn't been used yet, that's why I included this column comment, because that is where staff can also put in, we'll get this when we're on site, or any other comments, verifying things when they send this out. So we're kind of leaving it, where we need to clarify to have that comment space. So that's sort of our how to be even more clear. Questions?
Yes, this is Greg. Something on the list we already send to CS, such as the state plan, the annual report, IS, and that sort of thing. Are you still going to ask states to submit that as part of your training?
So this list that we have, to your question, no, we wouldn't ask, for example, the state plan, the annual report, the single audit, the FFR. We wouldn't ask you to resend those documents. The text number is also used for our own internal purposes. So each document for completeness, each document will be assigned a index number for our own records. Other times this is just like an overview, but currently what we have now, we'll send out what we truly need. Any documents that you have that we in-house, those documents would not be annotated on what we send you. But this list is just a list in its entirety of all documents that we reviewed, that we review at some point.
Okay.
Others?
Yes, Jackie, I do have a couple questions, and I think it goes back to what maybe Matt was saying, that some of this information looks like it could potentially come from the agencies. So I was looking at, I'm on the first page, number 3, list of board members along with resume of the EO. My first question is, what board members are you referring to, and what does EO stand for?
Okay, keep in mind that this list is used jointly by LIHE, and also we are also reaching out to our other grant program that we use, a discretionary grant. So this list currently kind of contains all documents that are obtained by all grant programs. This is, again, a list for you, an overview of everything that's needed. So that being said, the entity, so your state plan, for example, if we need to obtain additional information, that may be one of the items that we will request.
In that case,
you still want to chime in this as well?
Yeah. So
just
let me just say this. when it goes out, they two entities, they select 2 or 3 eligible entities, and so that's where the board members and other items would come from. Those pertain to the entities that the team identified.
Yeah, everybody, this is an OCS-wide document, so used by LIHEAP, the discretionary programs, as well as CSBG, which is why not everything on here will be requested. There'll be specific things requested from each program, but we wanted the program specialists to be able to have the full list on which program they might be looking at.
I have a suggestion, Kate, that I think.
No, wait a minute, Jackie. I had to cut you off this way.
Oh.
We're going to just brief. We're doing what should be better or different on any of this yet. Just want everybody to understand it. Go ahead.
I just also want to note that sometimes we may perform a hybrid review that would require not only CSBG reviewing CSB documents, but we may review LIHEAP, or we may review discretionary grants. So that's probably why, to your question, a lot of the information on here is, again, for all grant programs. The list that the states will be getting would be a list specifically for each of their grants.
Questions?
This is Jackie again. I just want to clarify that. So then that means, Alicia, so if you are going to be monitoring specifically for CSBG, even though this is a comprehensive document list, me at the state office for CSBG would be getting those items that would be relative to me.
That is correct. We're very consistent, so that has always been what we've been doing, sending out a list specifically for CSBG documents.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we clarified that. So this is a tool that should be helpful not just to the grantees, but also to the OCS staff. You have to create something every time, and it's clear, and if they're crossing between programs, it's clear. So that's why we're trying to, it goes back to the goal of having consistency across OCS and trying to be more efficient across OCS. So increasing efficiency and consistency, this was one tool.
Yeah.
Hopefully achieve it. And that's part of the questions we're going to be pursuing if this is something useful. Other questions? If not, then let's go to the next document. Can we go to the next slide, Muska? Monitoring tools, and I'm just going to cover this one too. Whoops. So what slide are we on for this one? Okay. So let me back over to Alicia to describe. We have 2 monitoring tools. One is the financial component, and then the other is the program administrative. And again, these are tools that are across OCS. So we have, we're going to present financial, Bill's going to present the other. Go ahead, Alicia.
Okay, again. In terms of the financial tool, the purpose of this tool was designed to be used for the OCS staff in conducting evaluations of the grant operation, so the state operation of the CSBG program, and determine how the federal funds are being used as it relates to compliance to federal regulations as it relates to the CSBG Act. So this particular tool, you can skip, go on to the next slide, please. And down in 2 parts. One is based on the overall uniform financial monitoring steps that apply to the CSBG program, and part 2 includes the financial monitoring steps related to cross-cutting programs within within how the funds are being used for the CSBG program.
Yeah. So why don't we pull up the tool at this point?
Okay. The criteria that we use for reviewing, assessing, evaluating the state operation is based on the CSBG Act. We use certain sections applicable to financial controls, and then also we use the codified 5 CFR, codified 45 CFR regulation. And talks about specifically, well, we'll mention the CSBG program. And also we use other directives and other mandates to also assess the financial operation of the state. You can go to the next slide. I'm sorry, I'm thinking you had the monitoring tool. Sorry. Okay, great. The part, as I indicated, talks about the financial controls. A lot of states already use a main tool as well. Our tool capture information as it relates to fiscal control, accounting controls. So here we're really looking at your policies as it relates to the fiscal operation. We look at the internal controls, your policies, what's being documented as far as the controls over approvals or controls over your federal funds are being used for the CSBG grant. We determine if there's policies with the PMS in terms of auditing. Federal reports, so we look at those policies. Also look at how the use of funds, the 90% funds is being used, admin funds, and also discretionary funds. So there pretty much will examine, again, your internal controls and how the federal expenditures were expended for the grant for the period of performance. To say that, can you go back to the bullet points in the PowerPoint presentation? That here. We made, okay, great. So the components here, the performance and financial monitoring and corrective action. We're looking at, again, pretty much the policies, the general ledger, and this is the one mentioned about the sample selection. We perform a judgmental sample and then out of the general ledger to determine how the funds were being used for the period of availability. That consists of looking at see if the funds were eligible, reasonable, and allowable as it relates to activities. So if the funds were used for CSB activities, we will also document that on the monitoring tool. If there are any exceptions, so disallowed costs, we also will note that as well. In terms of cash management, we'll see if the funds were dispersed timely to the eligible entities. General will determine, based on the general ledger, we'll look at your chart of accounts to see your being identifying and recognizing the federal expenditures in accordance with your policies and procedures and other federal regulations. That's an area that we're getting to delve in more into. We're going to look at your support. So we're going to determine if your indirect cost rate proposal was approved and is it in accordance with the 2 CFR 200. Well, if you don't recognize indirect costs, we also document if there's a cost allocation plan. We will determine based on your general ledger if the costs are, or the cost allocation worksheet, if the sample selections pulled a sample of expenditures and they were they were expended, they should have been expended on multiple programs, let's say, for example, HUD or CSBD or labor. Were those costs in fact allocated in accordance with your with allocation plan? The property, we will determine, this is an area based on the CFR, section, I think it's section 270, bear with me, I get my sections all mixed up, but 270, section 678F. So there was a waiver for that property or for the improvement of property. We would look at that because it's currently it's allowed, but if there's a waiver in place, we check to see the written correspondence. We would also your procurement processes to ensure that the item was procured in accordance with your policies and procedures. So we're looking at all internal controls on how you're expending the federal grant funds. And the tool that you have in front of you captures areas of exception. So if there were any areas of noncompliance, we will annotate that. And it's always going to be a criteria for that exception. We look at the specific financial monitoring steps. You can go on to that particular slide if you're able to pull it up. And then for the most part, we'll assess the monitoring report, and we'll determine if you're, based on the monitoring reports, we look at to see if areas were cross-cutting to the various grant programs held within OCS. So that's for the part. That's what we look at in terms of school. We'll identify any exceptions. We also know any best practices. We'll also annotate that in our work papers. So the document request list that you saw earlier, we'll be back on our notes, our work papers, for completeness.
Thanks, Alicia. Questions? It's clear? Tired on this one.
Okay, this is Chris. I like the tool, so it's more of a comment, and I really like that each of the questions have the criteria that's being evaluated. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned with the documents, if there's a link to the documents to each of the WP index, I think that's helpful for the staff doing the monitoring, and it also helpful if there's a problem in an area for states to understand what documents have been used to evaluate that component. So as we give feedback, that's all helpful. I love everything's together. So that's just a general comment.
Okay, thank you. Let's feel that way when we go out and ask. Well, that was part of the goal, was to try to make things clearer grantees and easier for staff. Other questions or comments? Thank you, Chris. Okay, let's move on to the program and administrative component, and Bill's going to walk us through that. That's slide number 15. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. If you can bring up the program administrative monitoring tool. So the easiest thing to do is to explain the tool used and talk a little bit about the program aspect of the monitoring. So those of you who are wondering, because I know it's Friday morning and you all are wondering, what is HHS 45 CR? Title 45 is the Public Welfare and Human Services section of the statute pertaining to block grants, Part 96, and 45 CFR Part 75. For those who are dying to know, is the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for HHS awards. This is all it can be found on the OMB website if you want further details on that. And that is what we base the Uniform Monitoring Review criteria on. So if you go to the next slide, please. Okay. In this section, just briefly describe the Program and Administrative Monitoring Tool, and it's transparent in terms of the different sections on here, either or OCS. So first work paper, controls work paper is for policy and procedures for how grantees or states administer the program. Point 2, org standards that include performance goals, admin standards, financial management requirements, and other requirements that ensure an appropriate level of accountability and among the eligible entities in accordance with Section 678B. See on the highlighted in bold italics what the criteria is and the rationale for that ask in that work paper. If we move this down a bit, Part 2, tripartite board. Slide down a bit.
It will down if sorry to interrupt, Bill, but if I scroll down, you won't be able to see that.
We can scroll down ourselves and move the page.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
You want 2, Bill? Are we on Part 2? Is that what you want, 2.1?
Yeah.
As long as you all can see, I mean, I can see it on my end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Part 2 is the tripartite board, and those are written procedures that address the tripartite board composition, in accordance with 676B, and again, Section 676B, Org Standards, Category 5, Governance. Part 3 is the section pertaining to training, monitoring, and technical assistance. And the elements that the program monitor looks for. The grantee has a monitoring plan and schedule visits for the eligible entities and subgrantees and what those procedures are. And those are relevant sections in the bold italics for the criteria. 3.2, the follow-up schedules for monitoring eligible entities. And I'm not going to go through each of the criteria, but it's on the screen here. 3.3 is the procedures to incorporate audit findings and results into the decision-making process. It's a duplicate financial control worksheet. Is the grantee additional monitoring and direct resources to the eligible entities that were determined to be at risk. If there's a concern, we program just wants to make sure that that's being addressed and how that's being addressed. 3 is documents to support training and technical assistance provided for those eligible entities that risk or have issues. And go down to Part 4, corrective action, terminate, reduction, designation, and redesignation. And IM is really critical, one that would be referenced in this, but it's that address the termination and reduction of funding in accordance with Section 678C and 116. And 4.2 is the designation, redesignation procedures. In accordance with that, part is performance measurement, and 5.1 is management system and process. Those are the criteria that the program monitors look for: reading the latest IS, the narrative description of the state plan. 5.2, the program monitor is ensuring that it addresses the national goals and accomplishes the program objectives within state and eligible entities' performance management data. 5.3, the verification accuracy of Roma data. And 5.4, the grantee provides Roma training technical assistance to the eligible entities that they'd want to ask potentially about, Roma trainers, certified trainers, and implementers. Part 6, administrative requirements that has to do with the public and legislative hearings that are required. Coordination and outreach, 6.2. The grantee ensures that the plans and needs assessment accurately reflect the demographics. 4, addresses the community action plan, the investment, the use of funds. 6 point is the annual reporting. You're getting feedback on very shortly from the program specialist. Some of them have already sent the feedback, but the program monitor would just or go over any additional items with regard to the annual report. And then after the monitoring team concludes the visit, they would provide a brief summary of the fees noted during the review, including supporting documentation. So just a note that I very strongly, and I know that Seth's agreement with this, program monitoring be a critical piece of the, assessment visit, the monitoring visit, and so the program specialist for the state, when possible, will be going on the monitoring team visit with the financial team. So, any questions?
We should make one note, Bill, that this particular tool that we presented was specific for CSBG. LIHEAP has another tool because obviously the programs are quite different. So the financial is one that's used jointly, but this tool is a bit more specific. I don't know if there's any overlap. There once might have been, but obviously they've now diverged, so that's fine. Any questions on this?
Hi, Kate. P12 organizational standards. Did you guys consider putting that in Part C under monitoring?
P2, a set of organizational standards.
Yeah, to me it fits better with monitoring, but Julie, I'm really happy that both looking at the monitoring and technical training and technical assistance in detail here, because that's where we spend a lot of our time. And I'm pleased that the questions reflect time we spent on our program.
Yeah, no, understand. And obviously, P12 is the fact that they've been created. It's a certain certain type of activity that's a little different than the monitor. But I understand your issue. Other questions? Okay.
Pretty straightforward. It wouldn't be a huge surprise because these are ones that are, covered by statute or covered by, OCS and our IM, and part of the performance management framework. So.
And actually, our goal with this.
I don't really have any questions. I do, like, as you're rolling out and stuff, there's plenty of room within it for interpretation, so I guess that's as with the Act. So, read grantee documentation to support training and technical assistance provided, stuff like that. It is kind of maybe we can build a reservoir of good examples of ways that you've shown that so that states get monitored later down the road. They'll kind of know what stuff to prepare specifically.
That's a great suggestion.
With you, I was thinking the same thing, that each state does things a little differently. So the interpretation might be a little different. I agree with what you just said.
Yeah. And this is a tool that's used when staff are on site. So there should be able to be those conversations about how it's viewed and what makes sense. So hopefully this at least gives everybody a place to start from. And to clear, especially if this monitoring tool is shared in advance, it will help people. But it hopefully makes it easier for staff too, because they can, go piece by piece and be able to then put this into a report. I cut somebody off. Who else had something to say?
This is Bill. The only thing that I was gonna add to that is to ensure, that there is in fact a training and technical assistance effort underway to address the deficiencies. We realize that states will do and can do that in various ways and are very effective. But we really just to ensure that exists, being addressed.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful, and I was thinking back to when I was monitored and some of the stuff I provided, and I was trying to think back to whether I'd shared it with NASCSP or whether you guys had shared it, afterwards, and I think that would be helpful, like if we passed it on, things thought were good from states to them, to NASCSP, so that they could share it with other states or something.
Yeah. Being one of our questions we ask if that would be helpful to states in making that a recommendation. Other questions?
If there's a deficiency that was identified, you have varying levels of that deficiency, and how is that collected and put into the report?
I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think the slide or the next section talks about the report list.
That's where I was going to go. Yep, let's go to that.
So the CSP report template, so after we collect supporting documentation based on what we requested from the document request list, and so we have observed any observations or through the process while during fieldwork testing. We then wrap up our report by preparing a draft monitoring report, and the monitoring report is broken out into four sections. The first section will talk about the executive summary, for instance, the background of the CSBG grant and how the grant provides financial assistance, to states and to local communities through work, through community action agencies. It also calls on how the CSB funds should be funded, how activities, I should say, should be funded. Additionally, it then talks about the state. So it highlights the state's background in terms of their activities and what they that what they propose to do with the funds based on the state plan. So it talks more about the state assessment authority, giving the authority allowing state assessments, the monitoring, to be conducted to perform oversight of the grant funds. The scope of review is also highlighted in the report. This defines the period of performance for the period of availability of funds. So basically it's saying scope year, if we're going to come out and do a monitoring review, we may want to review your fiscal year, a program year 2015. So we'll look at a lot of your expenditures and your activities that supported that period of performance. Methodology also is highlighted in Part 1, Section 1, and that's about the criteria. Criteria meaning the CDBG Act and any other regulations as they're applicable to the financial, admin, and the programmatic oversight. The state assessment finding and recommendation. Primarily, this is a summary of detailed issues that we noted as an exception, those areas of noncompliance. So we will state the finding through, you mentioned earlier about the interpretation. That's when we're on site. We perform observations, walkthroughs, we have discussions to ensure that what we have observed is consistent to your policies and what was reported or reported. So we do highlight that in that section. We also opportunities for improvement. So you annotate some areas maybe I'm going to consider to recommend in providing a compliant or enhancing your processes. The state, so Section 3 refers back to the tool in terms of what we actually reviewed, what we've actually tested, and what we actually observed. So each section is broken out by admin, the admin section, financial operations section, and the program section. The program section, for example, we observed the tripartite board. These areas that we noted in the process, that in that particular section. The financial operations, we about the general ledger, your overall fiscal operation as far as how you are, if your operation is sufficient. We address the FFR, the Federal Financial Report, and we address the single audit. The single audit, we look at not only your state single audit, but also we look at your audit readiness process as it relates to your other entities. How are you reviewing their single audits to ensure they're compliant? The administrative operation, we look at the 90%, we look at the carryover, we look at the discretionary. So in each of those sections, we make our observations and report on those 3 areas. Lastly, we talk about the next step. So if it's a draft report, we will express when that draft, the rest of the draft report and when your responses are due back. So after we have finalized the draft report, we ask that your office review have presented to you for clarification or for any other further comments. So that's a certain period that we have requested. And from there, once we get the response back, we then finalize the report as a final report. I think hopefully I've kind of addressed the nuts and bolts of our report for you.
I know this is the report format for CSBG. the other groups, all the other divisions have their own formats. But this is what CSBG has pulled together for a template. So this is what we'll be requesting feedback from the grantees. Any questions on the template? No? Okay.
Nope.
So our next meeting is next Friday, same time, same stuff. What we're going to do next week is kind of tie it all together. So we're going to look at the monitoring process, and we touched on that today a little bit because we talked about the document request. But, you know, the engagement letter and the time frames, and then we'll look at we're going to spend most of the time on the post-monitoring process. The internal grant monitoring team has come up with a way to better track the actions that are being requested. So we've got an internal tracking, and we've got some ways or some new process for connecting the correction with any TNTA and making TNTA requests to partners. So we're trying to do a better job of corrective action and the TNTA. So we'll talk a little bit about that next week so you can kind of see beginning to end what this now looks like. Because clearly you know sort of what the grant monitoring process is, and so there's a little bit more focus on the post-monitoring. We'll look at the cycle and the time frames, which is mostly, you know, what things that are looking a little bit different. And we're trying to make these particular things more consistent across OCS, so you a little bit more of that. So is everybody going to be able to be on the call next week? And it's kind of our add-on discussion. I think, okay, great, because where we want to be is to have everybody sort of understand the whole cycle. And our next step, and you can already start thinking about this, those of you that like to be ahead of the game, we're going to start thinking about what's the input we want from, in terms of having some focus groups. Actually, we have to figure out what type of focus groups, but in terms of questions we might want to have, in terms of each of these documents, what might we want to be asking people about, so we can flesh out a little bit of people's way into this, or things they're not clear about, or things they think we need to do differently. But if you start thinking about some of that, it's not anything hugely technical, but you might want to start thinking about that. Oh, any other, and we have recorded this, so if anybody wants to go back or needs any clarification on anything Alicia or Bill said, please feel free. Any other questions?
Hey, Chris, it looks like my boss scheduled me for a meeting on next Friday from 10 to 11. So I'll participate. So.
Okay, got you down. That's a question mark. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. I just thought of one question as we're going through. Do you use or refer to IM 102 anymore in your monitoring, or is that pretty much obsolete?
A question, because I don't even know what 102 is. Bill, Alicia?
So I think the I-102 is a great source of information for the states to ensure that they are maintaining the support on their own grant files or in their processes. So our office comes out to perform that assessment. It's not like new information that they don't know or not aware of. So it's a good resource to maintain in terms of what documents, what support should you have for a state, for a future state monitoring.
Yeah, for you who are not aware, IM 102 is the CSBG monitoring checklist.
Checklist.
That IM was put out on June 12th, 2012. The CSBG monitoring checklist is very similar to what we just presented, actually. So even though it's not the exact same document, I think there are, it's almost identical in many ways.
Except the document we presented, the requested document list, member includes the LIHEAP and the other organizations, the other divisions. So it cannot be identical to what IM 102, because IM 102 only covers CSBG. But it should have the same things. It should have the same things. So Greg's issue, each should be able to work, but if you have, half the states have both LIHEAP and CSBG. So document review request list makes more sense to use because you have both LIHEAP and CSBG. If you don't have LIHEAP, the other might make more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chris, Kay just sent you the link to the IM 102 checklist, and it's a checklist for states to prepare for OCS monitoring. Understanding it was, as Bill said, it was released in 2012, and it was a collaborative relationship and document from OCS and NASCSP. So it's to Greg's question is that states still use it to prepare for an OCS assessment. So much of it is relevant because a lot of it is based on the statute, but it might be something that we would look to update once we finalize all these new processes and documents.
Yeah, in fact, that what be helpful and we need to ask about is, because we have this new document, the document request list, ties to the monitoring tool and the report, it made more usable and comprehensive thing. Because we heard from the grantees, excuse me, something's in my throat, from the grantees was, gee, I'd like to see the stuff beforehand. Well, if that IM 102, what are they looking for? What do they need to see beforehand? That should have been the thing. So clearly there's some disconnect there, or they don't find that as useful. So having it connected to the monitoring tools and the report will make more sense, because otherwise it's here are documents and it's not, so what are those for? That's part of what we need to pursue, but yeah.
Right, and if I can just add one more thing, that because that was published in 2012, as we all know, there have been a lot of updates in terms of performance management, framework, org standards, etc., that are covered in IM 102, and that's why, the SBG program and fiscal piece that we just went over is more relevant because it incorporates the ends that have been developed over the past 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Greg, the bottom line is, 102 is probably a bit out of date. So the question is, do we update it? Do we discard it? What do we do with it? And that's going to part of what we come out of this group with. Suggestions about that. A recommendation about that. So yeah, good question.
Good. Thanks.
Other issues?
Chris, I'm guessing maybe we'll talk about it next week. Maybe it's the pre-screen. If OCS does the pre-selection, or when they select an agency, go through their assessment, and if they notice a deficiency, they add things to the monitoring tool that maybe will go to more focused dive in evaluating a component. And know that.
Yeah, notice in the monitoring tool, the preface of both of it says that, the monitoring tool is not intended to be all-inclusive. Reviewers can use professional judgment in developing, things. So, yes, we're not trying to strap people saying you can only look at this. So, if something else comes up. But this pretty much, 99.9% of the time covers almost anything. But, yeah, there is room.
But, there's also that training component. If there's something that federal partners identifying as a potential deficiency, and for us to have that conversation when they're out monitoring us, I think is important. So, we'll talk more about that maybe next week.
Yes, I think so. And part of the post-monitoring is we're trying now to track corrective action and our requests for training and technical assistance from our partners. The internal trend of that lets us also do reports of, okay, were the issues that were most identified? Are there specific issues where we're seeing deficiencies that we should ask NASCSP to do training on? We're trying to connect the dots here, which we just haven't been doing in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kate, I know you talked about that being in post-monitoring, but if assessments are being done early and training opportunities are starting to develop before OCS monitors us, pre-monitoring training and technical assistance to prep us would be even better. So
monitoring training. I couldn't hear you. So training and technical assistance.
If we could identify it as quickly as possible. I know we're doing it in our state where we do our assessment of our agencies. We let them know training opportunities. So before we monitor, they've already self-identified some areas that they could make improvements on. And something like that to consider for states would be just as wonderful for us to prepare.
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that. I mean, OCS is just trying to catch up in terms of connecting TA after they identify deficiencies, let alone before they even define them. But yes, let's look at what that landscape might look like. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Happy weekend, and we will talk next Friday. Thanks, Alicia and Bill.
Okay, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.